We've known each other for centuries.
It's fascinating to watch it all again, to realise the connection of what is real and what isn't in the smallest details. How immediately Teddy dislikes water, to never have cigarettes, to never lighting them himself, to merely know that the island has an electrified perimeter, even though this was his first time on the island. There are subtle prompts for Teddy also to remember, like the music playing, with strange conversations that explore the aspect of violence and monsters. But it can be understood that there is always a monster within us, whether we let it loose or keep it hidden. We cannot hide from ourselves, what with the chaos around us, but we can choose what to do with what we realise. The externalisation of the monster is perhaps part of a survivalism play, and here, with Teddy and Chuck, the lines between man and monster seem to blur. This is 2 takes, and this is 1 shot, an analysis of the film Shutter Island. Spoilers are ahead. Fear was maintained by the creation of monsters in nighttime stories. They were to keep children away from the darkness of night, close to the house, close to the purity of obedience. And then audio storytelling became books, with a far more vivid description, and then books became film, the visual becoming a reality. From Dracula, Frankenstein, the Wolfman and more, these monsters have evolved as we have. Monsters can now be within us, as well as around us, and that is scarier than we can ever imagine. Shutter Island, the name of the film, the name of the island that Ashkill Hospital for the Criminally Insane is featured, already hints at the entire story, if you think about it. The meaning of shutters is each of a pair of hinged panels fixed inside or outside a window that can be closed for security or privacy or to keep out the light. In the film, Leonardo DiCaprio's character has a guilt-ridden past which he loathes. In order to console himself, he pretends to be someone else, merging things in his past to be stretching the truth. So here, the shutter is personified as the truth-evading human, and the sunlight as the truth. At the island, we have a state of isolation from the rest of the world. When it comes to the metaphorical constructs of truth, isolation, and the state of the mind, there are more than you can shake a stick at. The make-believe storm, for instance, felt so real, so violent, but it was constructed as a mechanism to represent chaos of what is happening around Teddy. When Teddy learns the truth, everything is calm, the sun is shining, which is a complete contrast to when Teddy arrived on the boat on the cloudy days. This emphasizes that most of the storyline starts off confusing, and much like us, we're almost in the dark like Teddy. We find him on the boat, learning like him. When the story goes deeper, the weather gets worse, and much like the metaphor of the sun being like the truth, there's another small reference by Freud who described the subconscious as like the confusing cloudy weather in opposition to the clear skies of the conscious. But we can go even deeper and follow Teddy's state of mind by the subtle bandage that is on his forehead. Like a foreshadowing thought, it personifies him battling the visions, the fight for his subconscious, the truth, to surface. The closer to truth he is, the looser that bandage becomes, until within the final scenes, it is no longer there. So why not hide it? Bandage up the wound until it heals or gets worse. Out of sight, out of mind. And for Teddy, that is so far from the truth. The truth itself could feel like the edge of the world, the refusal of believing becoming quicksand that Teddy has already drowned in. Remember, this isn't the first time he has listened to his own truth. In this version, Teddy's harsh reality happens within a lighthouse. Like in my episode about 2019 film The Lighthouse, the symbolism of the lighthouse itself is vast throughout history and within the plot. However here, in so many words, the lighthouse could be a symbol of disclosure and revelation. But before it was the final place of putting the pieces of the puzzle back together, Teddy's delusions made him think it was a laboratory to create mindless soldiers. And although Teddy had been a soldier in war, the stories can be so far-fetched to those that have never witnessed it, even if the horror did happen. So creating soldiers and secret experiments might not sound too crazy to someone who has witnessed cruelty and carnage in concentration camps. But for those outside of having to bear witness or be part of that world, hearing this plot of mindless soldiers being made on an island for the criminally insane does sound crazy. And if you're already crazy, everything you say might be construed as crazy talk. But perhaps that's the beauty of it.
You think I'm crazy?
No, I
And if I say I'm not crazy? Well, that hardly helps, does it? It's the Kafka's genius of it. People tell the world you're crazy. Then all your protests to the contrary just confirm what they're saying.
I'm not following you, I'm sorry.
Once you're declared insane, then anything you do is called part of that insanity. Reasonable protests or denial. Valid fears. Paranoia.
Survival instincts are defense mechanisms.
You're smarter than you look, Marshall. That's probably not a good thing.
The effect of powerlessness or loss of control of situations. Once labelled something, it can be even harder for anyone to listen to what you're saying to have any kind of truth. So does that mean we should completely believe our protagonist? It seems not. So already, the metaphors are in place to show conflict in Teddy's mind and our questions about him and his story. But perhaps that was the intention all along, as even our own minds can cause doubts and affect our outcomes. The memories of war haunt Teddy as we see them whilst he talks to Dr. Nyring, with the doctor saying that the Marshal, Teddy, is a man of violence, but not necessarily a violent man.
Since the schoolyard, neither of you has ever walked away from a physical conflict. No, not because you enjoy it, but because retreat isn't something you consider an option.
Retreat from something real, a fight, something physical, cannot happen for Teddy as it shows weakness. But retreat from the mind, within the isolation, with no one watching, can happen it seems. Perhaps because Teddy doesn't realise he is doing it. Hence the difference of physical and mental health, and the difference of people that can retreat on some things, but not others. The body might be strong, but it's the brain, the mind, that controls it all. And for Teddy, or rather Andrew Ladis, the sadness, the rage, the loss, the guilt, the violence of that fateful day consumes him, and so the creation of another, his alter ego of Teddy, services to carry the chaos. The question of sanity goes further with more conversations of violence. The sudden talk of bombs when Teddy is grappled by one of the patients constructs the imagery of how weapons of mass destruction, weapons made for violence, can do their job. Of exploding, sure, but some, like the hydrogen bomb, implode, creating chaos within itself. Merge this talk with the car ride Teddy had with the warden, of how violence is within us and how God loves violence, so much so, it becomes a normal for us to do violent acts for the honour of having the choice of it. This violence can be outward by how we wage war, by burning sacrifices, pillaging, plundering, and tearing the flesh of others. Or it can be inward, like the hydrogen bomb, like the creation of make-believe, by denial, by blaming others, by isolation and hiding. The violence also reigns supreme in the premise of choice. It can be seen in the flashback of Teddy in the concentration camp with a Nazi on the floor trying to get the gun. The Nazi had tried to kill himself but had failed, and the need for the gun, whether to finish the job or to try and kill Teddy, we shall never know, was taken away from him. Teddy pushed the gun away from him, looked at him with mixed emotions of rage, sadness, and perhaps regret, and walked away. These mixed feelings can be the same with what happens next to Teddy. The choice that was unexpectedly given to him about his future of being lobotomized or cured.
Did you know that the word trauma comes from the Greek for wound? And what is the German word for dream? Traum. Ein Traum. Wounds can create monsters, and you You are wounded, Marshal. And wouldn't you agree, when you see a monster, you must stop it.
Trauma has probably happened in Teddy's life twice, if not more. The trauma of war, of killing for the sake of a bigger goal, a brighter future, of saving thousands of lives back home but not seeing firsthand the violence that men can do to their own kind. A reflection and first-hand account of the merging of monsters and men. And then the trauma of not saving one person who killed those closest around you. Teddy's wife warning him that something wasn't right, him ignoring it, and then to find everything you have worked hard for, the American dream, to be drowned and burned to ash. Like the moments of choice with the Nazi, Teddy did not give him the choice of the gun. But with Dolores, when she requested her release, he gave her it and cried in her dead arms. There is a choice between being a monster and being a human. The violence of action or inaction is reflected both here, and the worst part is the unknowing of whether it's the truth. We are following an unreliable protagonist, and that doesn't make him a monster. We see his crimes, but we can also see his humanity in letting her go. The guilt, now that is the real monster. And Teddy is the one with that burden, the overwhelming burden of only being human.
Which would be worse? To live as a monster, or to die as a good man?
The last line uses either a brief moment of sanity amidst the madness, or as a protagonist's choice of fate. It's really up to our interpretation, but the question is still a valid one. After everything you've done, would you want to remember it? Or live in blissful ignorance? The beauty lies in the choice of what you can do with it, and the aspect of violence, of being violent. There's violence of rage, of helplessness, of guilt. It doesn't necessarily mean to others, but to oneself. The violence of Teddy's choice, of creating a new identity with the fragments of the old ones, the violent turn from the insanity to reality, and the violent realization that the walls he had created had crumbled once more. And so, instead of regressing back into the make-believe world with the truth evading his dreams and the subconscious, Teddy winningly chose to have the violence to implode within himself, and left his fate to those around him. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed what was said, then please support the show from my Patreon. And if you want to know what's happening next, follow my Instagram. To know my day-to-day thoughts, follow my Twitter. And if you want to read what was said instead, then follow my blog, linked elsewhere. With your support, I can only make this better, so again, thank you from the bottom of my heart.